Welcome to the Simpleton Podcast. I am Clark Massey, broadcasting from the center of Christendom in Kansas City, Missouri.
I'm Laura Heeman from Hyattsville, Maryland.
Where I noticed that your lampshade in the background is totally crooked, and we'll send a few of our listeners, watchers.
That's very embarrassing, and I'm upset you told our listeners about it.
Right. All right. Laura has kind of a crooked lampshade. It's kind of a sign of, what's going on over there. All right.
General state of life here.
We are having a podcast to explain the Catholic Church's Synod on being synodal. That obviously sounds circular. It's not going to be as bad as it sounds. And we're here to explain it. We're going to talk about what it is and what to expect from the Synod. We're going to talk about how it works. Some of you have already maybe even been participating in the Synod. I mean, this process started in November, and there's some of these synodal sessions already happening. I believe this is the largest synod ever in the Catholic Church, although synods are something the Church regularly has done. Because this is a synod that literally is for everyone in the Church. Even some people outside the Church are mentioned, should be part of the Synod. What are the goals of the Synod? And then we're also going to talk about objections to the Synod, why people are hesitant to go to the Synod, and try to show the validity of those points, but also encourage people to go. All right. We have a special designation, and it's been very interesting because our ministry, according to the USCCB, is a national organization.
Fancy.
And I used air quotes for that. And when I say that, our missionaries busted out laughing. But we definitely are. We are a national organization. We're in Washington, D.C. and Kansas City. And I think it's very proper that we're, the USCCB asked us to participate in the Synod and to give a report directly to the USCCB. I really like that happened. It's just kind of funny because here in Kansas City, at the top of the staircase at Simple House, there is a copy machine, a paper folder, and a few accordions with some documents.
It's like literally on a landing.
Yeah, it's on the landing.
Literally on a,
It's where it fit well, and had to get it out of the way because people actually live there.
Can we use air quotes again for the word fit?
It's a big landing. It fits. Got a color copy on there, a big one, And when I give tours of Simple House and we get to the landing and I go, and this is the national headquarters of Simple House. This landing, All right. Let's start. So the cool part about being a national organization is the USCCB sent us an email. And as part of that email, they gave us the same instructions they're giving dioceses. So we got to see not only kind of the general handout for the Synod, but we also got to see what they were sending a diocese on how to execute a Synod. And this isn't a secret document. I mean, many people have gotten this document, but it's just it was also interesting to know that I know a handful of national organizations must have gotten this document, maybe more than a handful, but it wasn't written for us. They did it. They wrote it for the diocese, and then they were like, okay, well, you guys figure out how to adapt this to your own circumstance, and they sent it to us also.
Yeah, I mean, I think they gave us very few instructions, right? Yeah.
Right. We had to kind of look at the way the diocese is supposed to do it, and then kind of guess the way we as a non-diocese are supposed to do it. But I don't think this is bad. I do think it's good that I think that organizations like us are more in touch with the poor and with missionary work than just a diocese is. And so I think it is interesting to get organizations like us to get the poor as a voice within the Synod.
Yep.
So I think it's good, even though it made us laugh. All right. What is a Catholic Synod? All right. I want to start by talking about, we all know what a council is, and what is the difference between a council and a synod? Synods are related to discipline and practice within the Church, and they're informative. Councils are related to discipline, practice, and doctrine. So,
how would you define discipline?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't like that you asked me that question. I think that this is one of the most confusing things about Catholicism And you'll see a lot of people who have objections to the church, and they haven't been able to kind of fully sort discipline, practice, and doctrine, the distinction. And there's not a lot of things in our life that have these three different layers. Doctrine is clearly, essential beliefs of the Catholic Church, infallible doctrines. Discipline and practice has everything to do with like canon law to literally like how you're worshiping, I'm trying to think of like another organization that might have a similar setup. And my only thought would be maybe baseball, or maybe like you could use like baseball we'll use as an analogy, because it's like there's the rules of baseball, the most important part. Then there's all these rules about salary cap, free agents, little penalties if you violate these things, right? That deal with all these like baseball clubs, right? And then every stadium also has its own set of rules that are like literally stadium specific that have to do with like how you actually run a game there. Because these maybe some people don't know this, but like Major League Baseball stadiums aren't even the same size, right? Like the Royals, for example, here in Kansas City have an extra large stadium. It's extra hard to hit a home run, and they have fountains in the outfield. Well, they have to have some rules about what happens if a ball hits the fountains.
Yeah, right. But not every stadium needs to have those rules. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Camden Yards does not need to have those rules. Yeah.
Right. So they're kind of stadium-specific rules.
Mm-hmm. But you would never say, if a ball goes into the fountain, it counts as a double, as a, rule of baseball.
Right.
Well, anyway, I think this is important, though. And once, I think a thing that has kind of gotten the church in trouble, like public perception, like how frequently have you seen in like a news article, like, and the church teaches XYZ, and you're like, the church doesn't teach that. That's just how these, particular monks, live, or whatever it is, and even I was recently interviewed for an article about the kids' school, and the interviewer, the reporter, said, well, I know that the church teaches, that you're supposed to do this. I went to Catholic school, and I was like, that is just what happened at your Catholic school. But it's even within Catholicism, it's misunderstood, and it's really wildly misunderstood in wider culture.
And you also see it like it's probably a doctrine that only men will be priests. I feel like that was very settled by JP2 when he said, this is just the way it is and we can't change it,
Right.
But you'll see things where like maybe girls are allowed to be altar servers, and people and this is a movement towards changing the doctrine.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's not a movement towards changing the doctrine. Yeah. That is just a change in practice,
Right.
Or discipline. I'm not even positive what the distinction there totally is. One might just be canon law, and one might be like how you actually, things that are your practices that are not directly related to canon law.
If someone wants to explain that in a YouTube comment, it would help all of us.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
The other thing, though, is like disciplines and practices are very important, even though they're not doctrine, because doctrine at the end of the day is not how you live your life.
Right.
You live your life with disciplines and practices, not by just consenting to doctrines. So they're all very important. Okay, but the Synod only deals with the discipline and practice. It's not about changing doctrine. People are going to show up and talk about, hey, I hate this doctrine, but that's not actually what the Synod's about, and it will not change any doctrines.
Yeah, and even in terms of discipline and practice, like the Synod is not decision making. It's like a chance for discussion, a chance for like the bishops, the Pope to hear what people are thinking, but they are supposed to be throughout the Synod, like discerning where the Spirit is leading, and
that's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but so it's not decision making is the
at the end of the Synod, we don't have some vote to change the discipline and practice. It's merely a listening session. So, but let's try to figure out, like, I think these documents spend a lot of time trying to explain what a Synod is. And I think they have to spend a lot of time explaining it because there's very little in our everyday lives that is like this. And I think for Americans, I tried to come up with some corollaries, like what are we familiar with that this might be similar to? at one level, it's kind of a brainstorming session. At another level, it's like at Simple House, what we do is we do workshops where we're like, let's workshop this idea. Like, here's the questions we're going to ask. Here's the subject we're going to work on. All right, now as a group, let's talk about this and come up with ideas and work through this, right? But at the end of the day, it still has to be like the decision of the house head or me as like the organization head to like whether or not we do it, you know. And another example in American society would be like the town hall meeting.
Right.
It's actually not a legislative body meeting.
Yeah, no one's voting during the town hall meeting. Yeah.
Right. I think the only thing that is very unlike this is the synod is actually, the discussion itself is supposed to be transforming.
Right.
Right. That's why it's a synod and being synodal. The theme is like journeying together. Like, how do we as a church have greater unity and journey together? And we're going to have a synod on how to, you know, literally listen to each other better and, you know, journey together better. Am I summarizing that correctly?
Yeah. I think this is maybe some people were a little frustrated with trying to understand what this was, because it's like, welcome to the synod of synods. By means of synod, we achieve synod.
Right.
But I think there's a good, like there's an idea about journeying together. And it's supposed to be like uniting and healing and a great many things. But I think a good corollary would be how Jesus calls himself the way, you know, and it's like, to get to Jesus, you have to get on the way. But Jesus also is the way. So he's both like the journey and the destination. So I think that kind of is a good corollary that can give some depth to the idea.
Right. There's a sense in which that your parish having a synod is supposed to be about unity and journeying together, but the synod practice itself at your parish is journeying together in unity. And merely by speaking about it, you're also bringing it into being. Like, you're bringing it to the forefront of everyone's mind. You're asking like, hey, this is an issue. How would I address it? And thus you're giving some like time and run to it, you know? Yeah. When people might be journeying apart.
Right.
You know, at the parish.
Right.
All right. So what to expect? Well, the first thing I want to say is I haven't spent a lot of time looking at this German synod that's been going on, but I know that people have been mentioning it to me. The German synod is not this synod on synodality. You know, the German synod is a synod about the sex abuse crisis in Germany, and you would expect that to be a pretty hot issue, you know, if you're going to have a big town hall meeting on the sex abuse crisis, you know. And what are we to expect in a synod setting? The reason why people are bringing up the German synod is because they're like, look, someone's advocating for this like change in doctrine at the German synod, or someone's advocating for this immoral thing, you know, about how, you know, I don't know what exactly the topic is. So I'm not like following what individual people say at the German synod. But in a synod and in any town hall meeting, I hate this, but it is a little bit of an open mic. You know, I kind of hate open mics. Been to that a lot. I'm not talking about like comedian open mics. I'm talking about like
those are terrible too.
Yeah, those are. Well, I respect that is probably how you have to start as a comedian. But I'm talking about like at a funeral when they're like, "Does anyone want to come up and talk?" And you're like, "Oh no." I don't know if I told this story, but look, Laura, your husband and I were at a funeral. And there was open mic, and we were like the only white guys at the funeral. And we have this policy that when we go in places, we're kind of like, we try not to be a clique. So like, we're like not sitting together. We're sitting on like other sides.
Like the missionaries of Simple House.
Yeah, missionaries. Like if you go somewhere like a barbecue, you know, you don't want like 4 missionaries standing together, particularly if you're a different race than everyone else at the barbecue, right? So we're at this funeral of a person we know that was killed in street violence. And we're not sitting together. They have an open mic, and this guy comes up and starts saying how the white people have poisoned the water and how the white man's, you know, controlling and using mind control and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just kind of like crazy talk, but like all against white people. Point is, we're there and he's going off and he's like not going to stop because he's really enjoying having the mic. And everyone is very respectfully listening to him. And then this like older woman, black woman next to me starts standing up and clapping. Like, yeah, do it. Yeah, like down with, and I've already got my head in my hands, like, feeling terrible, about the situation. And I look over at her and she locks eyes with me and she says, "It's the only way to get him to shut up." Okay, so hate open mics. All right. And it worked. She started clapping. Other people clapped. And then two big brothers got up there and took him right off the stage. And it was fine. Okay, so, all right. There's an open mic aspect. Where was I going with that? Oh, whenever you have an open mic, you're going to have crazy people say their opinions. You're going to have heresy said. But to remember that, one, this isn't about doctrine. The documents themselves are like, look, the synodal process is not a democracy. It's not a parliament. Right. It's not popular opinion does not get to just win, at the synod, And
I think there's part of it, like we can ask the Holy Spirit to be present and like expect him to show up, and trust that the Holy Spirit will be active. And I like there's like in one of the documents, it talks about like, it quotes Thessalonians and like, do not quench the spirit and test everything, retain what is good. And I think it's like, we don't need to be afraid of the heretical person or the crazy person and something good might come out. Like, we don't need to be afraid of.
Well, it's also true that like, if you have a lot of heretical opinions coming out that are surprising to you, that this in fact is good.
Yeah.
We had a workshop at Simple House on our retreat this year, and we called it Simple House 2030. And it was about like what you want Simple House to be in 2030, what you want to preserve that you think is very essential to Simple House. And during that talk, it kind of got off the rails, and we started realizing that a good fraction of our missionaries kind of don't get what we're about on a few things, right? And after that talk, the house leaders who were at that talk, Margot and Chelsea, I had to talk to both of them because they were very perturbed by the talk. They're very, one aspect was like, they're like, should we even ask people their opinion if they're going to give this opinion? And my thought was the very amount that our house leaders were shocked by the answer showed how important the talk was, because we're literally going to stress different things next year during training. We're going to reform based on what we saw as the misunderstanding that was being expressed, know? So like, if you want to be a missionary, if you want to help people with their faith, if you want to, in a sense, be someone who spiritually heals people in your parish, you need to go and hear the crazy ideas that they're thinking. And the ones that are most surprising to you are the ones you most needed to hear, because that's your like missionary ground.
Yeah. I thought there was a thing in the document an idea that I thought was really interesting. And it was like, it says there are like 3 kind of main players in the gospel plus an extra, which gets brought up later. But, and it was saying like, obviously there's Jesus. And then there is the crowd, and the crowd is all the people that sort of interact and are in and out of the gospels. And that could be like the poor or just a different kind of like unformed people that are encountering Jesus somehow in the gospel and then are going back to their daily lives. The third group was the apostles. But the thing that is interesting about the crowd is that they are quoted throughout the gospels, and so Jesus like allows the crowd to it's like the crowd are
have a voice.
And it's recorded forever. And, as like kind of in an essential part of our faith. And so there's just an interaction, and it's like, sometimes like if you think of the woman at the well, she's like, well, what about this? Well, what about that? Well, what about this? And Jesus is like bringing her back to him. And so that's an interesting and necessary dynamic of the gospel.
I think this also has to do with like your vision of church, right? Like the crowd has always been part of the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
I can't remember who said like when you're at a Catholic church, it's like, here comes everybody, you know?
Was that Dorothy Day? No.
I don't remember who said that.
I forget who that. Yeah, never mind. Anyway, yeah. No, that wasn't, whatever.
Do you want to have a church where there are no ill-formed people, you know, or poorly formed people? Do you want people only have a church where everyone's absolutely on point theologically? Do you want to have a church where there are no crazies? Do you want to have a church where people are literally afraid to say the wrong thing?
Yeah.
You know, I think, that's just not a Catholic church, right? Now, I do see like there is kind of this movement in the Catholic Church now that's a little bit of a two-edged sword because it does have a positive part of it too, where we're forming these kind of like super parishes where literally everyone in the parish is pretty well formed.
Yeah.
They might have a spiritual problem, but they certainly don't have a doctrinal problem.
Sure.
You know, and they are pretty good about not saying wrong things. You know, maybe I would argue they're a little bit crazy, but so that they're honoring that aspect of the true Catholic Church. But this is kind of a weird thing in the church that's troubling to me, is that we're seeing a lot of like what I think of as super Catholics, like people who have really got good theological educations, all gravitating to hang out at the same parish, when it used to be that those people would have been sprinkled around parishes and be the top parishioners at, you know, what you might think of as a less on fire parish, or you know, like, and I think there's a big mission field there at Catholic parishes that we're neglecting by taking all these super Catholics and putting them in one location.
Yeah, I think I have I agree with what you're saying. I also have a little bit of a tension with that because I've been at parishes, you know, where maybe people were less on fire, and it's like, where do you get fed? You know, so it's like, I think there is a little bit of a tension there. Like, you need to be the missionary to your parish, but you also need to be fed by your parish. But I another interesting idea in this document about like the apostles is like, if the apostles don't have the crowd, if they don't have, you know, the crowd, that they become sectarian and self-referential. And I think that's like a good.
That's right. Yeah. And that is kind of what you see happen at some of these kind of what I call Mecca parishes.
Yes.
You know?
And they you can kind of like eat themselves up, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's go on to the next point. So expect some crazy. Catholic Church has always included some crazy, and it's not a bad thing necessarily. All right.
Oh, you know, I'm sorry. Let me say something Dorothy Day did say. She would talk about like the kind of crazies that like go to the church and are like there all day long with all their millions of prayer cards and their strange, you know, little. And she was like, well, if you're going to go crazy, what a wonderful way to go crazy.
You know, I've often thought that. You and I debated that once because the shrine has always had a certain factor of like real crazy people there, you know, and in a way I like admire them, right? You know, you can't even believe how devoted they are, right? But then another way you're like, this is kind of messing everything up, you know. But okay, all right. How is the Synod organized for the next part of this? The Synod is kind of a pyramid, you know, and every level of the pyramid is a filter that's kind of filtering out the nonsense. So a whole lot of the point of the Synod is you having the synodal meeting itself and kind of orienting everyone in your parish towards journeying together, towards being, you know, church, you know. But you as a parish will issue a report after you've done that session to your diocese. And it's not a very long report. It can't say everything that was said in your meeting, you know. So there's a filter there. But then the diocese is going to take however many parish reports they get, you know, 50, 100, 150, depending on the size of the diocese. And guess what it's going to do? It's going to take all that and sum it up into another short report. You know, so once again, the crazy's filtered out, you know, if that's what you're worried about. And then that's going to pass on to the USCCB, which is going to summarize the diocese and then pass it to Rome. And then Rome has got to summarize, you know, all the dioceses of the whole world and then have an in-person synod to talk about the issue. Mm-hmm. And a Simple House is going to participate in this by submitting a report directly to the USCCB alongside the diocese. So that's nice. But
yeah, and then likely the Pope will write some kind of papal exhortation or something at the end.
I think that is probably the end thing,
Yeah.
And I don't think it has to be like say there's an issue brought up, let me try to think of a more or less positive issue, like the church needs to evangelize the poor better, right? Mm-hmm. Or needs to catechize better, say, right? Just because that is a minority opinion coming out of the parishes does not mean it doesn't make the diocesan report.
Right.
Yeah. And even if it's a majority opinion, it doesn't necessarily make the diocesan report. And if it makes it, and so there can be these like minority opinions that are very good opinions that can still move up the synodal process.
Right.
If people, really want to give voice to it, all right. What is the goal of this? Is to create unity and to kind of keep us away from schisms, mm-hmm. which is schisms are not just a historical thing. They're always a threat to the church. I believe it's also to find blind spots. And for me, I know that right now in my life, I hang out with my wife and family. I hang out with our kind of married couple friends. I hang out with the Simpleton missionaries. And I don't hang out with a bunch of nihilists. I don't hang out with a bunch of people who are like in the vibe of the culture right now.
Yeah.
And I kind of have to go out of my way to figure out that vibe of the culture if I want to be a missionary.
Right.
And I think like if we think of like a C.S. Lewis or whatever, like he knew his own time, and he spoke to it. And his writings are still powerful now, like if you read Screw Tape or something, or Mere Christianity, but they were probably even more powerful when he wrote them,
Yeah.
And to the extent that you're only hanging out like in your little group, you have these blind spots where you actually don't understand what people are really struggling with. And I think bishops can have this problem. Because bishops hang out with their priests, they hang out with other bishops, and then people who are really active complainers, they have to deal with those people. Mm-hmm. And they also have to deal with like some elite Catholics who are in their set or circle, right? But like the bishops actually knowing what the people think is a challenge.
Yeah, and I think it's like a common complaint that like even a number of priests, but the bishops like have no idea what's going on in family life, like it's right. Like, and obviously they're not experiencing family life like, husband and wife, but you would kind of hope that, through their parish or whatever, a priest would get, more in touch with that, but not all priests are at parishes, and maybe not all bishops have spent a lot of time at parishes. Or some people just don't have the social talent to sort of see, Right. But yeah, that's just an example of like I think a frustration that is common in my circle. So this is a great this is a great opportunity to express those frustrations.
Right. Or not just frustrations, but maybe actually promote a good change. Yeah. Or, just positive feedback.
Yeah. What would you? What would it mean to have, a priest? What would you want a priest to understand about family life? Mm-hmm.
I think it's also, a lot of the people, like if you have social media, the people who are most likely to respond to you are the people who disagree with you.
Yeah.
And sometimes, or the people who are like the biggest complainers are maybe the people the bishops hear the most from.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this is an opportunity where they're kind of inviting and encouraging everyone to get around and kind of like share their thoughts, more than just the people who kind of went way out of their way to share their thoughts.
Yeah.
And that's important. So let's talk about, I think mostly we've said some good things about what our hopes are for this. Let's talk about some objections to this. Mm-hmm. My first objection that I don't think I'm alone in this is everyone has been part of a passive aggressive listening session.
Yeah.
Where they say they're about feedback, but really they're about making you think the right way or giving their opinion to you. and it's all about like exerting social pressure and conformity on something. You know, it's not actually about hearing what you think.
Yeah.
And I think that definitely can happen in this synod. I think it's a valid concern, but I think the answer to that is not to not have a synod, but is to be brave.
Yeah. And I have, I've heard examples of, people who have gone to like group therapy, and they came away from group therapy with like ideas of how to be even more sick than they were before. But like, I don't think we cancel group therapy. Like group therapy has helped a great many people.
Right. But I also think like this idea that like when I said be brave, I kind of meant going to a place and having the courage to be authentic, even if your opinion is unpopular.
Yeah.
And what happens all the time is that when people have these kind of manipulative sessions, the person who is brave and authentic has a huge amount of support, even if it doesn't come out publicly because people are afraid. But there's like this silent majority who's actually agreeing with you, and you're voicing what they all wish they could say.
Yeah. And they're relieved. Yeah.
Right. So if you're an active Catholic and you're worried that like your opinion won't be the one that wins, get out there and lovingly express your opinion.
Yeah.
And you'll be surprised how useful that is.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is like your moment to help evangelize even the church.
Yeah.
Another critique of this is I think that what a lot of people want from the church right now is, hey, the church has this kind of figured out. Look at how much truth the church has and how crazy the world is right now. And I'm very sympathetic with that. And that what we need now is like a strong leadership that's going to go out there and say, look, world, here's how it is, and if we just like express these truths that a whole lot of the people know, that this will be the very best move for the church. And that by having a synod, you're kind of showing weakness. Instead of strong leadership, you're kind of saying, oh, we want to hear what you guys think. Please give me some feedback, right? As opposed to just going forward with, your catechism and your, fire and brimstone and like, knocking it out of the park. I don't think this criticism hits home for me.
Yeah.
My reason would be, I don't think people outside the church care that we're having this synod. And I think even if it makes the paper in some random way, I don't think it's going to be any major PR change. I think the church...
the paper is already going to report that church doctrine is changing no matter what.
Right. So. And no one's reading papers anyway at this point. But it's like, you can have if some Catholic doesn't believe the church teaching on homosexuality or abortion or anything, it's like,
it's not
the
news.
church,
it
doesn't change the public perception that the church is a great bulwark against these things.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just hasn't, I just don't think the PR problem is the problem.
Yeah. I also just think that the idea that leadership can't be, firm in teaching while listening to
that's right.
Its people is bizarre. I don't see why those things need to be opposed to each other. And I think also it needs to be acknowledged that there's like a sort of people come to understand and appreciate what is true through different avenues. And to some people, like talking through it, expressing frustration, whatever is really important and meaningful, but I don't see like why we need to limit the avenues.
I love how you said you think it's bizarre. It's like you've already given up on good leadership if you think leadership either has to be listening or strong.
Right.
So you've already given up on a good leader right there, right? It's like saying a parent needs to be either strict or compassionate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like you've already given up on having a good parent if you think that's the dichotomy.
Yeah.
Next critique. We brought this up as the first thing, that there's a lot of jargon involved here, and that this is going to be a rather circular, maybe not very fruitful enterprise. Like we're having the synod on being synodal.
Yeah.
I think there's a valid critique in here, and we tried to explain, and I think the critique goes beyond synod on being synodal. Like I think we did a pretty good job, Laura, particularly you, when you said that Christ is the way. Christ is also the destination. How do you get to the destination? Well, you get it through Christ. How do you get to Christ? You get through Christ. I think that's a great explanation of that. What I'm thinking is during college, I lived in a hippie co-op called Sunflower House at the University of Kansas, and I really enjoyed living there. I was kind of out of the 30-some people who lived there, I was the only person who you could call conservative. And really, I was kind of like a libertarian Catholic person,
Yeah.
And I remember we were having a bunch of house meetings on changing the charter of the house. And this would have been the 90s. And they wanted to put that we were a progressive establishment in the charter. Right? And I saw that progressive, and I saw how much they cared about getting that word in there.
Yeah.
And I thought, we don't want that word in there.
Yeah.
And what was funny was when I asked them what the word means, they said, Clark, it just means forward looking. So Clark, even though you might have these different views in us, you still can be forward looking and you can be progressive,
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I'm getting lied to.
Yeah.
This is not, there's a manipulation happening behind this jargon.
Yeah.
And that happens, and I think that's a real valid concern. But part of that's, people, if you have that concern, that's all the more reason for you to show up.
Right.
And blow up the jargon,
Right.
And be brave and be authentic.
Yeah. And I think apart from the people are afraid that the kind of people organizing the synod have a certain agenda that they're trying to push forward. And again, so that's an invitation to show up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean that, and if that's a challenge, well, I mean, that's the challenge of your faith to express yourself and explain it,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the last, I had here two more possible objections. One was that it's open mic. Go ahead.
Can I just say, the idea of that there is a certain agenda, that's being pushed forward. If you're not in agreement with it, that means there's a giant gaping hole that needs healing. Right. Anyway, that's all.
Right. If you're worried about the future of the church and about weird opinions in the church or anything, or just opinions other than your own, you might be the weird guy.
Yeah.
The synod is what you want.
Right.
The synod is your chance to address it. The synod is your chance to express your view, and it might be unpopular, and that's okay. It's okay if you have an unpopular view. The unpopular views are sometimes the right ones.
Yeah.
All right.
The unpopular view is sometimes the right one, but if there's a lot of people sensing that there's a problem with women and leadership in the church or whatever, it just has to be addressed. You can't not address it.
Right.
Even if you think that women in the church have an appropriate place now or whatever, you can't say this is not a problem, so we're just going to ignore it.
You're kind of getting in the realm of repression.
Yeah.
After that, you're just going to ignore the problem and it'll go away, and that doesn't happen. That's how schisms happen. And heresies form. All right. It's an open mic for heresy. I feel like we've talked about that already so many times. Another critique would be somehow by asking people what you think we should do, you make people upset when you don't do it. Simple House is very collegial. I take correction. I'm 45. Simple House going on 20 years. I started it. Laura started it. But brand new missionary walks in the door. They're 21 and they issue us a correction. Right?
Yeah.
In many organizations, that just does not happen. Right? But we're actually inviting people, innovate on the ministry, tell us what you really think. If you give us corrections, if you think we're off track, make us be true to the things we said we're going to be true to.
Right.
And we at least have to face that. Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's been something that keeps us on track. But I also know that there's a point where sometimes when I ask someone's opinion, it can be bad leadership if, say I know that no matter what, we have to do an unpopular thing. We have to mean, most of the unpopular things, ironically, are popular with my crew. But like, say I'm like, we're going to have to outreach to the homeless in this park on Saturday, and no one wants to work Saturday, or but Saturday's the only day they're all there, and therefore the only good ministry could happen on Saturday. I don't at the beginning of the week say, what do you guys think about working on Saturday? And then hear how they all hate working on Saturday, and go, guess what? You're all working on Saturday. You know, I mean, like, it's not good. Like, what you actually do is you make them more disgruntled, because now they feel like you don't care what they think.
Right.
You know? So there is this kind of like balancing act with leadership, that you want to know what everyone thinks, but every once in a while, if something just has to be a certain way, you don't want to like do a survey and then do the opposite of what everyone just told you they wanted. Yeah. You know? Because you're like creating enemies, you know, that way, right? If you just say, hey, we need to work on Saturday, everybody's like, okay, understand, swallow hard, let's go do it. You know, now I'm on board, right? Right. So I think there's a little bit of that here too, that people are worried about, that like, if we, and I think there's an elitism there, meaning like, it's like if we ask all these dumb people what they want the church to do, they're going to say dumb things. And then when we tell them they're wrong, they're going to be pissed, you know? Yeah. Everyone in the church right now, thinking of the American church, you're not part of a very popular institution. Yeah. You've had to wade through some stuff to get here, you know? Right. And you've had to like swim against the currents a little bit to be in it, you know? I think I think we need to hear what people think. Yeah. You know, and I think they can handle it too. Yeah. I want to know what a Simple House is going to do in response to the invitation to participate in the Synod, because I am on the outs here. You guys had a meeting during retreat, right? Laura's on the outs because we purposely keep her on the outs. Yes. No, Laura did not come all the way to Missouri for our monastic retreat this year, for our silent retreat. So, here's what we're planning on doing. The Synod was very deliberate about saying we need the poor to also say and have a part in this, you know? And I actually think there's some really relevant things the poor could comment on that the church, that I kind of need to know, and the church itself needs to know. And I think the only reason why it made sense that the USCCB kind of tapped us on the shoulder and sent us that email is because we are working very much in friendship and alongside the poor. And we can tap into that. Like, there's not that many like single moms on welfare showing up to Catholic Mass on Sunday, right? But single moms on welfare interact with the church, at least the charitable arms, and us, you know, quite a bit. And same with the homeless, you know. So we're going to try to target those groups. We decided we were not going to do one-on-one interviews. We were going to try to keep it synodal, like do group gatherings. So our group size is usually going to only be about 6 people, maybe 2 missionaries to 3 missionaries, and like 2 to 5, you know, hopefully 3 to 5 people we serve, you know. And we've come up with some questions that we want to ask our groups to kind of, and then we're having the missionaries who are there kind of summarize the little individual synods that then become kind of get summarized again in the Simple House, you know, master report to the USCCB. Are the missionaries like facilitating and participating in these, or just mainly asking questions and letting people answer? We're trying to make it a conversation where missionaries participate. And it's been interesting because like, this is not a pure survey, right? Yeah. It was never meant to be, but there's this temptation to think it should be, and it's not, you know, like, and there's also this issue that the way we phrase the question actually really influences the way our little synodal gatherings are going to go. Yeah. You know, but there's no way to get around it. You need to phrase questions or we're not going to have a real conversation. So the questions we phrased were along the lines of like, what is your historical like interaction with the Catholic Church? Like find out people were raised Catholic, find out if they're going to, here in Kansas City, they go to the cathedral, has a huge homeless ministry called Gold Dome. Find out what their interactions are with the church. Ask them what they think the church is, which I'm very curious to hear what that is,
Yeah.
And then we're going to ask them what ministries of any church have had a very great influence on them. Like try to get out of them, what are the characteristics of really good church ministry?
Yeah.
I wanted to have the conversations go a little bit in the direction of, do you believe that when you receive charitable help, that there should also be spiritual help?
Yeah.
This has been a big deal at Simple House because so many organizations only do charity and are kind of allergic to doing the missionary work. And I actually want to know straight from the poor how they feel about that.
Mm-hmm.
Do they expect to be prayed with if they're going to the Gold Dome and receiving help? If they go to Catholic Charities, do they want to be prayed with? Do they want to go to a religious ceremony? Or they think that would be like a big turnoff to them, like a big coercion? I suspect, but this is the whole point of having a synod, is so you're not just getting Clark Massey's suspicion.
Yeah.
I suspect they want the religious ceremony.
Yeah. I mean, just based on my experience, I would suspect that as well. Times that we've showed up to people's doors and thought, ooh, they probably don't want to pray. And you try to slide out and they're like, aren't you going to pray with us?
Right.
Like I think every missionary here has had that experience. So, like these people are doing drugs. They don't want me to pray with them, and they're like, where are you going? But it would be interesting to see how people respond. And I would also be curious, like, I know people really like our prayers, but maybe they appreciate going to pick up food somewhere real quick and not having to do, I don't know, it would be just interesting to.
Yeah, I want to see how they phrase it too, because I think I know the direction they're going to say it, but I don't know if they're going to say it kind of weakly or powerfully or better than I would.
Yeah, or have a strong opinion about it one way or the other. Yeah.
And I think that's important. I think also just part of the synod is like, we're the people who work with the poor every day. The church wants to hear from us too. So I don't think it's wrong if we put a little bit of ourselves in these reports.
Yeah, I agree. I liked in the documents, like, just that there was a special concern, like that the poor, all of them are, the people of God, whether Catholic or not Catholic, and I liked that being in the documents.
I think a big blind spot I see within like my own circles in the church is the concerns of the poor and the concerns of what I think of as like the modern nihilist or the postmodern nihilist, whatever you want to say. But anyway, the nihilism that is affecting our society today. People coming from both poverty and that nihilism, which are different people, or could be the same, but it's a separate issue. They have concerns that we are not focusing on. For example, I think the nihilist needs Jesus as a life raft.
Yeah.
And we're kind of building the city of God over here, not thinking of Jesus as a life raft,
Yeah.
But he is the life raft of nihilism, and he's the thing that's going to teach them what they need to do tomorrow. And it's like Jordan Peterson is kind of famous for saying, like, make your bed, But like, there's a little bit of Jesus where he just tells you how to make your bed. He's like, all right, you just need to be a little bit kinder. You need to do this,
Yeah.
And I think we're missing that. Like, I don't think the church is responding to the modern nihilism very well. And there's still people finding Christ there, but they're not doing it because of the work we're doing, and we need to help them more, I think.
Right.
And I also think the poor, they just don't have theological problems with God.
Yeah, we had this, I think Ryan and I talk about a lot is when they translated the Mass, like for a whole year, we were like hearing our friends argue about what does this mean? What are they trying to tell us with these changes? And, picking them apart. And at our church in Southeast, like literally Father Moore announced the week before the translation's like, the Mass has been translated. We're going to have these cards in the pews. You need to follow around. And everyone was like, okay, because there were more pressing,
Right.
People had more pressing concerns. And what is the church doing to help parents keep their kids off the street, off drugs?
There you go. Like, keep your kids off the street. Like, Christ is a radical alternative to the street. Christ is a radical alternative to the TV show Friends. You know?
Yeah.
And that's like where Christ is going to do most of his work, right? Not on whether much smaller things that we seem to be concerned with once you're converted and, you know, like talking to just a bunch of other people who are converted, you know?
Yeah.
So we kind of, I'm hoping that like by interviewing the poor, we're going to find out more what those real fundamental things are that they really want. And that will actually be help all of us from getting too nerdy about our faith.
Yeah. I wanted to read a warning that was in the preparatory document.
So we decided to end with this because it's such a cool zinger. But all right, go for it.
Okay. So I talked earlier about how it identifies the three players in the gospel: Jesus, the crowd, and the apostles. And then it says plus an extra one. And the extra one is the antagonist, who is divisive. Satan. It's also like the devil. But a quote about the antagonizer and the division in this document is this: the insidiousness that divides and thus thwarts a common path manifests itself indifferently in the forms of religious rigor, of moral injunction that presents itself as more demanding than that of Jesus, and of the seduction of a worldly political wisdom that claims to be more effective than a discernment of spirits.
So I like that because I think it kind of dovetails with something we were talking about in the Traditionalist podcast series we did. Mm-hmm. Thank you to everyone who gave us feedback on that, by the way. That was pretty well received. The idea that there's kind of two major errors almost. Mm-hmm. There's kind of the pharisaical error, which is the like over rigorous error where it becomes like moralistic competition of holiness. I can be more religious than you type attitude. And then there's the opposite error, which is like the Sadducees, where it's like the world is right and we're bringing the church up to date with the world, you know, and it's a kind of this no better elitism that I think most people who are still in the church find so contemptible at this point. But this is like, you know, can't you just, you know, you're just so, you know, out of date, or, you know, you're on the wrong side of history.
Yeah.
My wife went off on the wrong side of the history. She was hilarious. He goes, it's like such an insulting thing. It's like when someone says, not only am I right, everyone in the future agrees with me.
That's hilarious. Yeah. I think it's interesting that we're using that as a metric because it's a metric that shifts and will shift for all of time, how history is written, you know?
Right.
Yeah. But
like the winners write history, but you're on the wrong side of history, or like, you know, like, I don't know.
No, I mean, well, the winners did write history for a while, and now we're rewriting that history, and now it'll be rewritten again, you know, in 100 years. And yeah, but I don't know. I think that is a good warning. And I think that people are afraid that these types of things will go in the wrong direction. And it's because they fear sort of the other side, you know, like I think a lot of people will fall into one temptation more than the other, you know, right. And the idea of mentioning that in the document is that we need constant conversion, that we need to be looking for the guidance of the Holy Spirit, and not inserting, you know, more demands than Jesus asks of us, not giving into the wisdom of the world.
I actually think the best place to be is to have been a little bit tempted by the wisdom of the world, and to also have been a little bit tempted by the pharisaical impulse. And if you, it's kind of like if you don't know what the product is, you're the product, or if you don't know what the manipulative scam is, you're getting scammed. You know, it's like you should kind of know what this pharisaical like tendency that's in you is, and like know that you got to work on correcting it. You should also know this like compromise with the world tendency you have and work on correcting it. And if you're not ever seeing those things in yourself, you've got a bigger problem.
Yeah, right.
You don't see a problem, you got a bigger problem.
Right.
Okay, well, great. Well, Laura, thank you for talking to me about this.
Yes, may the synod be a blessing to the church.
Praise be to God.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Clark.
All right. Talk to you later.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.